I think that was probably one of the more memorable exchanges of the night, and something tells me that Texas Senator Ted Cruz had an idea. That issue of whether you're a citizen or not would come up. You were ready for that, weren't you?
Well, look, I mean, it was certainly telegraphed, and Donald has been launching those attacks every day for a week, and so I suspected it might come up.
Why do you think he is?
Well, I mean, we talked about it in the debate. I mean, he had said back in September he'd looked into it, his lawyers looked into it, there was no issue at all. And I think the reason is simple. His poll numbers are falling.
But is the bromance gone? Are you two, do you hate each other now?
Listen, from my end, I like Donald. I'll continue to sing his praises. I am not attacking him. I'm going to defend myself. I'm not going to sit there and just...
But I noticed in the past, Senator, you would slough it off, maybe with a little Reagan humor and all. And you did have a humorous response, but you were not going to take this lying down. So how did you and your staff decide how to go about handling this?
Well, listen, it's shifted into a different phase. Once we began taking the lead in the Iowa polls, you saw Donald seem to get very upset about that. And event after event, he would give 5, 6, 7 minute, basically lengthy attacks directed at me.
But you must have known that moment was coming, right?
Well, to be honest, you hope so. I mean, listen, if in this debate no one was taking a shot at me, it
but
would
I'm
mean
saying
we
about
weren't doing anything.
This unusual rapport that you two had, which stood out because everyone else with Trump, they were ripping each other's, eyes out.
Well,
but it wasn't. But now, I guess what I'm wondering about is the next time you guys are at this or a venue, is the same old drill?
Listen, from my end, my approach is going to be the same with every candidate, not just Donald, but everybody else, which is
particularly Marco Rubio.
But look, on the early debates where we had, food fights and personal insults, and things got pretty ugly.
Yeah.
And I consistently declined to get in the middle of that. I don't think the American people care about politicians bickering like school children. So I'll have a policy discussion with Marco. I'll have a substantive disagreement on his support for amnesty and my opposition to that. But that's a policy discussion. I think Marco is charming. I like him personally. And in terms of the ad hominem attacks, I'm not going to engage in them with any of the candidates on that field.
So what brings it out? I noticed, and we always try, that's why we went a little over tonight, Senator, if you indulge us, because we want to allow you to respond to something. Then he goes and explains a record that he says you exaggerated, his inconsistencies, then goes after your inconsistencies and all. Do you ever feel that you're just talking past each other, though?
No, I actually think the American people are a lot smarter than many politicians.
Well, they don't know
and a lot of folks
they don't know the truth.
But they do. But see, that's the bit. They do know the truth. So the voters understand.
Is it fair to say both of you have evolved on positions?
No,
really?
It actually isn't. And the voters are smart enough. They remember the Gang of Eight fight. They remember that Marco was standing side by side with Chuck Schumer and with Harry Reid and Barack Obama. They remember he was fighting for amnesty.
So when he talks about issues like you with ethanol and politically convenient votes, what do you say?
Look, it is...
You wouldn't be the first politician who said to just.
It is unfortunately the classic game that you see Washington politicians do, which is...
Well, your positions have evolved on that issue.
They have not, actually. My positions are exactly the same. My positions have always been that I'm opposed to mandates on energy. I believe that we should pursue all of the above with no mandate subsidies for anyone. And I would note almost...
But what changed is you seem to put a 5-year time frame on it.
That was in 2014 in the legislation that I filed. I put in place a 5-year phase-out because people have reasonable investment-back expectations. But my position is end every mandate, have a fair and level playing field, no mandates or subsidies for oil and gas, for wind, for solar, for ethanol, for anybody. And I'll tell you in Iowa what I've been talking about. There's a far more important barrier to ethanol producers than the RFS is a benefit, and that is the EPA's blend wall that makes it illegal to sell higher blends of ethanol. I'll end the EPA's blend wall, which will enable...
So you're not afraid that these guys are going to pile up on you and say, well, we think he's slowing down in Iowa. We think we can catch him, pound him between this and the citizenship thing. Well, look, we can knock him off.
Of course they're going to pile up. 3-4 weeks ago, just about every candidate on that stage was attacking Donald Trump. Today, just about every candidate on that stage is attacking me. And I think the reason is what we've seen happen is conservatives are uniting on the ground Conservatives are coming together, and we're seeing that old Reagan coalition. We're seeing conservatives and evangelicals and libertarians all coming together. We're seeing young people and Hispanics and African Americans and Jewish voters and women and Reagan Democrats. And listen, I understand why the other candidates are very dismayed. If conservatives unite, we win. And my view, you asked before we went on air if the attacks bother me. Listen, I follow that old adage, if you're not taking flack, you're not over the target. The fact that they're throwing the kitchen sink, the fact that the mainstream media and the attacks are coming fast and furious is an indication of just how strong our grassroots
prior attacks, Senator, you've addressed, I wouldn't say with an all shucks Reagan, let it fly, but you came back with a surgical strike. With good humor sometimes, but other times, it was the first time I've seen in you, sir, a little bit of anger.
Well, look, maybe I'm getting better.
So are you angry?
I'm not remotely angry. I am.
So what were you? I noticed you and Donald Trump briefly talking. I mean, how did that go?
Listen, I like Donald. He is terrific. He is an incredible marketer. He's a very talented entertainer, and he's got courage. I've said from the beginning.
Would you make him your vice president?
Well, I mentioned that possibility. Listen, I've said from the beginning that I was grateful Donald was in this race because he's framed the central question of the race as who will stand up to Washington. Now, as you know, before I was in the Senate, I was a Supreme Court litigator. It's what I did for north of a decade. And I'm a big fan of Sun Tzu's adage that every battle is won before it's fought. It's won by choosing the terrain. If the central question of this race is who will stand up to Washington, the natural follow-up is who has stood up to Washington, who's taken on not just Democrats, but leaders in our own party. And if that is the terrain, if that's the narrative, we win. Because my record is very different from everyone else's.
Bang some heads doing that. And a couple of your critics say, well, comes around, goes around. We don't think there's anything to this citizenship issue, but we don't like the guy. He doesn't, make our lives easier. He's a little irreverent and impolite to us. We're gonna make his life difficult.
Listen, it is no surprise to anyone that the Washington cartel is striking back. That they are dismayed. They are dismayed beyond words. That
but
conservatives
it
are
almost
uniting.
Seems like your friends at Danny, or where are your friends in the Senate?
Well, look, and they're particularly dismayed because more and more this is coming down to a two-man race. The polling, the support, it is more and more looking like it is Donald Trump and me, and that has the Washington cartel.
Do you have to win Iowa?
No, of course not. And there's no one state we have to win. We will compete and do well in Iowa. I believe we'll compete and do well in New Hampshire. We'll compete and do well in South Carolina.
Senator, a lot of people think you'll win Iowa. Donald Trump has a good shot at taking New Hampshire. And then we go into territory that is considered a little more friendly to you down south. And you have operations everywhere.
Super Tuesday, 10 days after South Carolina.
Prior Iowa winners in your party have not been able to do. So you have an operation in place there. Then what?
Well, we've got a national campaign. We're one of the very few campaigns that has a national campaign. We've got over 175,000 volunteers. We also have the most money in the bank. And, it hasn't been the case that the conservative, the grassroots conservative, has had money since 1980. Reagan was the last time.
What, did you raise 21, 22 in the latest?
We raised over $20 million in the last quarter. We've raised over $47 million. And the reason is that's now come from over 700,000 contributions, which means we have the resources to go the distance. And one of the things we're seeing, more and more people are coming behind us saying, listen, you guys are the only campaign that can beat Donald Trump. And so if it's a two-man choice, people are making a choice. Who do I think is best prepared to be commander-in-chief? Who do I think is best prepared to lead this country? And we are seeing our fundraising exploding. We're seeing our grassroots explode. We're seeing
any of that
come on board.
Pause a little bit because, most lawyers agree with you that they don't think the whole citizenship issue is a real issue. A lot of them say if it gives people pause, if they think that some nut is going to actually drag this into court, as much as I like this guy, Cruz, I might think of someone else.
Neil, there are always nuts who will sue any president. And yes, whoever the president is will have a gazillion suits by a gazillion nuts, and they'll all be thrown out of court.
No, but this is to hit you in the crib, so you can't get up.
Yeah, but it doesn't have any legs.
Okay.
And back to what we said before, I think the American people are much smarter than many in the media give him credit for. I think that people are looking for who's ready to be commander-in-chief, who has the experience, the knowledge, the clarity of vision, the strength of resolve to keep this country safe. Listen, when people this morning woke up and looked at 10 American sailors on their knees with their hands on their head, look, I was angry. You want to talk about being angry? That made me angry to see American sailors with Iran trying to humiliate them, and we have a commander-in-chief who is so weak. This is the manifestation of that. And I think all of the rest of these noise and attacks, the people don't care about. They want someone to keep us safe. And if I'm elected, we will repeal Obamacare, we'll kill the terrorists, and I'll defend the Constitution.
Senator, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Great job tonight. Continued success.
I appreciate it.
I don't think this guy sleeps either. He says he does. I don't know. All right, continued coverage from the Spin Room here. We're wrapping up our Fox Business debate. A lot more questions about where the race goes from here, but the first presidential debate of this new year is now history. Now, what history remains to be made? Stick around. You are watching Fox Business.